Okay, I think everything should be up and working. I hope so. Either way, we're going to get started. All right. Hello. Hope everybody's having a good day. I've got up on the screen right now today's page. And today's page, I wrote it down. I'm at the point now where as soon as I start presenting what the suggestion was for a page, I've immediately forgotten. So today's suggestion was a spaceship that is haunted by corporate decisions. And this suggestion comes from our friend Edward G. Edward's last name, I give initials because, I don't want to give away the ghost on people's names because sometimes people aren't comfortable with that. So, but Edward has a really interesting last name. And so I asked for permission it's Globulin, which I'm not sure of the ethnicity of that. It's just a really intriguing last name. Anyhow, thank you, Edward, for today's suggestion. And I appreciate that. A lot of fun. I drew this straight on, just using a couple of markers. And I'll pull the camera up for that. So there we go. So there's the original art for that one. And, Chris says, hello, we're coming in. Come on in. You're welcome aboard. So there's the original art for that page. And in the final result, we put through our Photoshop, we put some dialogue on that, get our title going, so on and so forth. And there's our 82nd one page of the year. I was figuring out about this. I'm actually at about 114 one page stories, but 114 other images that I've done, but 82 one page stories. Some of the stuff that we've done in the last week, boy, oh boy, we got lots of people coming in. Hi, everybody. Is some of our other little shorts, and I'll talk about those in a minute. Welcome aboard to all of our visitors today, in addition to all of our regulars that are joining in with us on a regular basis. We've got a fun little talk ahead of us. I'm going to talk about a number of different things. We're going to do so in a brief amount of time. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I'm sorry for the squeaking chair. I'm sorry if my cat Corbin interrupts us. But that tends to happen during these streams. What we've got is a couple of different ideas to speak on. And that is art and creativity in general. And we're going to talk about some strategies for people to be able to incorporate that in their regular lives, and incorporate some ways of self-expression in order to help you find an internal voice that may provide for you an opportunity to be able to express yourself in such a way as to say that in such a way that is in using mechanisms of communication that you might not normally do so. We all have those possibilities. Some people use music, some people use writing, some people use poetry as a form of writing, not just prose. Some people use creative expression in crafts like knitting, macrame, doing things with clay, doing things with wood, and other people do more traditional two-dimensional works like drawing, painting, printmaking, the like. So we're going to talk about all kinds of different creative outlets that we can use like that for ourselves. So I'm going to pop my big old noggin on there and put the overhead on. Hi. Welcome aboard, everybody that I haven't seen in a little while. And for everybody that's new, that's joining us. Some of the things that I'm talking about when I talk about art and creativity, what I'm speaking to specifically is the idea of being able to find a way to communicate your ideas and some of those internal things that we want to get outwards to the world. Now, it might not be direct communication. It might not be specifically talking to another person, whether it's with your voice, whether it's with your hands, whether it's with something that you've made. And so one of the ways that I do that is I write and illustrate books. And here's a couple of those different books that I've done over time. And, and leading up to our one-page story approach that we take now. And I mean, some of those books are, let me see if I got some examples for you. Some more traditional material, like we've got, I'm finding some fun pages to show you. Here's some more traditional storytelling examples that I have in the black and white format, where you'll see different ways of communicating ideas and stories and images, that also leading up into drawing entire books in ballpoint pen and trying to find interesting ways to tell some story ideas that I have. This one was done with a friend, Owen Boyd. Then what we started doing at the start of the pandemic is that I started having an opportunity for people that were finding themselves in a state of isolation where they could express an idea to me, and I would go home and I would try to create a one-page story from that. And so that's where you've got ideas like Nicolas Cage giving a notice about lockdowns as the Queen of England, or how the El Mariachi character Antonio Banderas would portray as, yes, way too sexy. So just so silly bits of business, and using different mediums to do some of these stories in, and trying to find vehicles for expressing ideas and helping to release some of the anxiety and tension that people were building up at the time, and seeing what we can come up with that and exploring all kinds of different ways. And so that's now led to what we do today with the layout I have for these books, for the one-page extravaganza books, are by having the original, like here's the finished page, here's some of the original art images that are showcased on the side, but underneath, and I'll zoom in for this, we get our technology working for us. There we go, look at the magic. So is that the suggestion that comes from somebody, what my thinking was behind that, and right above that, having the example of the finished page. And then by showcasing the different medium that we can use in telling some of these stories, it sort of opens up the possibility to people for all the different ways in which we can try different things out in order to tell those stories with. Our creativity does not need to be limited to, and then this is just the format that I utilize through books to be able to tell some of those things. If you're able to run your finger over this, this is the netting that we use in North America to have our oranges, our onions, and things like that collected in. So we have these mesh bags. Well, I'll recycle those, and in this case I've used it to make a butterfly net on the paper, and even the butterfly netting that just works throughout the composition of the page, so you get these interesting hive patterns and stuff. So it's about expressing different ideas and using whatever we can find. I'm going to move the camera for a quick second, and I'm going to show you a couple things that I'm about to put into play here. So bear with me for some of the movement. I keep in my studio space all of these different mark making tools nearby. All of these different materials that I can draw on in a moment's notice. All kinds of different pens, markers, paints, This is more markers in here. These are things like charcoal and Conte and crayons. This is just extra random bits of paper. We've got, in addition to that, as I move to the other side of my digital bay in my studio, I have all kinds of acrylics and things like that, and a large canvas series that I'm working on. These are all pens and pencils and mark making tools, as are all of these. And so, as you can see, I've been sitting here in more papers as well. lots more papers. So I've been sitting here in one static position as I'm wheeling the camera around to show you all these things. I don't expect that everybody has that opportunity, that affordance to be able to have things nearby on this kind of a level. I've been working creatively for 30 plus years in my studio space. So I've collected a rather large assortment of things to have accessible for me to work in, because I'm multidisciplinarian. Big word, means I'm able to utilize a whole bunch of different art making tools with some degree of ability or proficiency, which is a more specific word. I'm going to start getting into some of the questions in a second. Do I have any specific strategies or creative rituals that help you overcome writer's block when working on a comic? Well, how about working specifically? Liz says it's surprisingly tidy. Thank you, Liz. I'm going to get to that in just 1 second. I have lots. One of the things that I do, and I just did some pieces that and I'm going to switch the camera for a quick second, and then we're going to start getting into sketchbooks. So one of the things, let me get my big balding head out of the road. One of the things that I've done recently is a number of works for a client where I've been utilizing chalk. And in utilizing the chalk that I have, I've been creating some different visual images. And so those will pop up in just a sec. There we go. And in addition to that, I've been doing some portrait work for them as well. And so with this portrait work, and I've got a couple of pictures that I'm able to show you of those. Just 1 sec. Lots of files. I got a lot of files here, folks. Okay, here we go. So I've got all kinds of different projects that I've been working on for some clients, and I use a whole bunch of different materials to do those. Now, up on the screen now is a chalk piece. What's coming up now, immediately following it, is a large painting. And so with said large painting, we're going to zoom in a huge way. And so you can see it, and it looks like a standardized painting, which is the idea that we want to get across to our client, that we've just got this project as wrote, as we've created it. But one of the ways I break through creative block, or I worry about the surface. A lot of times when we have a surface that we want to work on and we want to draw on, and we're like, I don't want to wreck a page and make a mistake. One of the things that I do right off the hop, and I'll show you this by zooming in, is that I put tape and mixed up ripped pieces of paper, and you should be able to see some of these here in these zooms, where you can see the different pieces of paper on the screen now, and you'll see what looks like little, immediately it might look like a tear or some sort of surface difference. And that's what you'll see just underneath that large dark branch there. That's actually a piece of tape on the surface for me to work on to break away from that concern. In the background of the chalk drawings, you can see a whole bunch of squares. Those are squares that I've adhered down to the surface of the piece of paper before I started working on it. I'll often scribble in compositions beforehand. I'll just doodle specifically with marker, not worry about the mistakes as we go. We can go over those along the way. All of these different things that I'm showing in screen are to example the fact that those things don't matter. And I'll show you some more examples of stuff like that, just for us to break through some of our concern about creative block. What do I work on? Look at the space around you, see something around you, start drawing it. Things like that. And we'll show some examples of those in a second. Have I ever had idea block while working? No. I'll show you why. How did I start doing comics? I picked up a pencil. These answers that I'm giving you sound very ambivalent, and they sound like just easy answers or easy excuses. One of the reasons that I say these things is because they shouldn't hinder or keep you from whatever it is that you want to try to do. And I'll show you the fastest and easiest secret mechanism to get started in a second. It sounds like a lot of hype. It sounds like one of these things you see online. Here's the easiest answer to make art. I'm not talking about that, but I'll show you something that really helps. How do I find a balance between my vision and the need to make my work profitable? Eventually, the right people find what you're doing. It's as simple as that. Do what you do, express as you need to express. You will find a marketplace for that. It sounds very accommodating, an answer like that. But truth be told, the right people will find what you do. So we've got what inspires me the most when I'm creating. How do you stay creative when you feel you're stuck? And when I'm not feeling inspired or in a bad mood, do I try to motivate myself? Okay. And then there's a black and white over color question. We'll get to that too. Thank you, everybody, for these awesome questions. And keep them coming in. I'm going to try to keep answering them as much as I can in our time together. So, here is some answers. These are books where people throw whatever random ideas at me, and I do them. And there's a lot of ideas there. That's purposeful. Whatever these random ideas that are suggested to me are, that come in from people, here's all kinds of additional examples of those. Okay, here's even more that I write down and I try to complete. And I write them all down in this workbook. I have additional projects that I'm working on as well in this book, where I try to keep my notes together. I use this vehicle or this mechanism in order for me to just keep any source of idea that comes in, or any source of idea that's suggested to me. I write them down. I try to have those handy. You can do it with small notebooks that are this big, with a small pen that you can keep in your pocket, or your jacket pocket, or your back pocket, depending on how much space you've got. You can keep sketchbooks that are this equal in size. I'm a large person. I have big gorilla hands, but this will fit in the back of my pant pocket, or in a coat pocket, or in the chest pocket, like so. It helps my size that I have a little more pocket space because I'm 5'18", but you can use something like this for sketching little ideas. Here's a couple of trucks driving through an area of rocks in the forest. Here's a sketch of the doctor's office as I'm sitting there with a couple of markers I had in my pocket. There's a tractor I just drove by. Here's some random silly ideas of a person jumping across him. A span of buildings. Wouldn't it be better if he had wings? Silliness. But even these more organized images aren't necessary. This is just one type of sketchbook that a person can keep. And that helps to keep your creative energy going. If it's art that you want to express yourself in, if it's writing that you want to express yourself in, these small notebooks and sketchbooks will help to do that. You can take that on. And this isn't everybody's belief system, but it just happens to be mine. I draw the services that I sit in on each Sunday. And so I make notes and I draw the sermons that I attend with whatever I have in my pockets. And I've been doing this for some time. I've got a lot of them. I've collected a number of these as finished images. But that's another mechanism that I use. My sketchbooks there's a blank page. It's a rarity for me because my sketchbooks get crazy of whatever I feel like scribbling and doodling, and I do so over top of other images because it just keeps the flow going. And when I open any given page, I can see something of interest that I might have to pick at and possibly use on another project. By just randomly collecting your thoughts, as opposed to just trying to do a finished drawing on a piece of paper, get ideas down. All right? Allow that creativity to spill out of you. And whether these are just overhead wires on telephone poles, and making some notes on that. Just a couple of quick sketches on that. But what these things allow you to do is to be able to spill out these notions and these ideas in the pages. This is just explosions. Why not? See where we can go with that, what we can do with those things. Here's me trying to utilize a method of taking a gray tone or a blue marker, a light blue marker, with a dark blue pen on a white piece of paper. 3 values, and seeing what we can do for telling stories with that. It's the same thing, but not in a finished, structured way. This is just drawing everything that's around me and where my ideas, my mind takes me to. So having opportunities like that for yourself in some sort of collected way that you can draw back on allows you to be able to touch into those ideas and to put those random ideas, those random different associations of things, carrots and somebody walking down the street while whistling. How do you put those together? Why not have a carrot person, a person whose body resembles a carrot, walking down the street whistling in a world where everybody's made of carrots? Silly, yes, but if you close yourself off to that opportunity, you're not going to find a way to express a larger idea through whatever creative outlet you can find. And if it means in this world where you want to talk about politics or you want to talk about economics, you can do so in a world where everybody just happens to be made of carrots. And that vehicle of having people made of carrots, as contrived as it might be, and I'm sorry if I'm using words outside of people's ken. Sometimes it's fun to look those things up as well. I recognize, though, it's not first language for everybody. When you do something in such a strange way, it might draw people in. It might put people off. Those aren't your people. Don't worry about that. So another way of doing stories and wanting to do it in a comic book format is to sit down. I'm at the wrong side of the sketchbook. Is to sit down and just start doodling out compositions. Hi, Corbin. My cat's here. Just start doodling out compositions on paper in a really rough and loose way, and see what that generates for you. See if doing that in such a simplistic approach provides for you ways that you can start to draw out these as finished pages. And there's going to be mechanisms in that and creative viewpoints in that you might not have considered if you sat down trying to labor out a finished thing. But when you're looking for a moment of creativity, what do I work on? Oh, well, I did this before. Maybe I want to flush that out more clearly. So things like this, let's try those pages on their side in what's called a landscape format. So things like this allow you to try to find different ways to express those ideas without having to overinvest your time into the finished project. So, here's an even smaller format that one can use. Here's a medium-sized format that one can use. All of these things you can then draw upon for finished projects. And there's no reason that you shouldn't, right? But sometimes you're not ready to do, and I'll come back to some questions in a second. I appreciate all the comments and investment. We'll be with you back in a moment. When you work on larger things, this sketchbook is too large to fit in the camera. I apologize for that. I've got it at full open on my camera, and yet this sketchbook is 2 feet by 2.5. So this is me trying different approaches, and I'm sorry I'm banging the camera, to doing a bunch of studies of Moses for a local church. And here's a study image to work from. Here's a way of interpreting it with watercolor. Do I really just want to reproduce that? Well, at least it's a starting source. But at the same time, I'm trying a little bit of study of this bush in acrylics. I've got this other directional interpretation in pencil crayon. This one is in just a drawing pen down at the bottom. And then in the next page, give me a second while I flip this over. And I'm not going to show you all these. I'm just trying to show you different ways that you can do things. And they can have different levels of finish to them. The point isn't the razzle dazzle. I'm not trying to showcase like, look how great these things are. What I'm trying to show you is there's so many different ways you can do things. Do you want to say hi? This is my cat Corbin. He thinks I'm talking to him right now. Hey everybody, how you doing? There you go. You got that in your system. Now we can go away. These are looking at images of raft paintings. The Oath of the Medusa is a famous painting. So I'm using this again for studies for another larger project. Here's me drawing it out in pencil crayon, but here's me painting in acrylic. And meanwhile down below, there's a study in markers. So, and there's lots and lots more of that nonsense in there. When I say nonsense, I mean my silly sketching approach. So you can use, if you just want to do, if you have some paint and you have some pieces of wood, you can do some studies of faces. If you have, and you can try a beautiful myriad of different faces and cultures that we have in the world and try to get all the different sort of approaches to painting all of our different skin sets. My camera fell over. I apologize. There you go. It's one of those days. Well, you don't need me a face in here so much. How's that? We'll just take that out. I banged it. There's me starting to draw a sci-fi city only using 3 colors. So I can't get as much color onto that, or as much light onto that as I'd like. You can take, my point is, use everything and anything that you feel compelled to use and want to try. Let's try some more questions. They said we were at. What inspires me the most? I try to stay open to everything. When I'm not feeling inspired, how do I motivate myself? Start scribbling. Just start scribbling. I'll show you in a sec. What kind of style or drawing do I prefer? I have a hard time getting myself down to isolating to a certain specific style. What naturally happens is no matter what material that you use or what subject matter that you're trying to depict, your natural stylistic approach is going to come through. Your voice, your creative voice is going to come through. When you play music, the style of music that seems to naturally come out of you comes out in whatever different musical approach you're trying. If you're doing techno music or you're playing acoustic guitar, stylistically there's a tone that's going to come out of it. What are my favorite techniques? Again, I'm multidisciplinary, so I try lots. And Liz is saying, great questions. Thanks, Liz. Have I done any design or comic for any company, or has my work always been personal? I've worked for a number of companies. I had pulled a couple of those books to show you, but then I decided that let's stay away from some of the corporate things that I've done because I don't necessarily have everybody's permission for showcasing things during this. But yeah, I've done work for a bunch of different companies. My this book here, these alphabet book series, I'm not sure if you're aware of this person's name who wrote the preview or the review for this book, but yeah, he used to be the publisher and editor-in-chief of Marvel Comics. So yeah, you get to know people over time and get to work on different things with people over time. What's the first comic that I made? It was called Elmwood, #1. I'm now working on number 12 to complete this story arc. I just haven't touched it in about 9 years, so I thought I'd do a hardcover book that just collects, synopsizes what happened in those first 11 books and ties it all together in a big finish. So, is there any place I feel especially inspired when I'm drawing? I always have sketchbooks and notebooks around me. I have a bag that I carry. It has a couple of different sketchbooks and a notepad, and it tends to come with me wherever I go. Last night I run an event called the London Comic Jam, which is where I teach people comic drawing here in London, and I tend to bring a few of my published books and a few of my sketchbooks with me, and so I can use examples as I'm trying to show people things. So I always tend to have stuff, and I always tend to work wherever I am. When my wife is drawing, I'm sitting beside her. When my wife is driving, I'm sitting beside her drawing. When I'm driving, I've still got that sketchbook stuff in the back in case we switch positions on our trip. Have I ever created a character just to explore a specific emotion? Tons of them. Do I usually plan my drawings in advance, or do you let them flow as you draw? I let them go. I let them flow. Somebody gives me an idea and I go with it. This is a suggestion from the other day. It is, let me see if I can pull the camera back up. There we go. This is King Arthur. This is King Arthur, how, people kind of think he looks. This is more realistic to how he actually did, if he existed. And this is him receiving the sword from the Excalibur from the Lady in the Lake. And this is him pulling the sword out of a stone. But the suggestion is King Arthur, but his magical sword was made out of balloons. So in both of these instances, it's they're balloon swords that he's wielding. So, there's no planning here. I'm just working from one side across the board, exploring an idea. And so we can take whatever idea comes to mind, break it down. There's what people think. There's what is more likely to have looked like if he existed. And here's the Lady in the Lake, but also the sword and stones part of that story. Which way did he get the sword or not? And I'm still incorporating the fact it's a balloon sword. So you just stay open to ideas. Now, level of sophistication in drawing grows over time. You can work in all kinds of different sizes. I've been trying to show you all kinds of different ways. These are pencil crayon. This is acrylic paint on colored paper. Same thing. This is pencil crayon. This is paint. This is ballpoint pen. This is a white pencil on a dark piece of paper. Again, this is trying all kinds of different things here and still in progress. You can sketch in ballpoint pen on little pieces of business cards. You can make miniature books like this. You can draw a miniature comic on one piece of paper that you can then fold up into a book form. And if you watch this week's streams, you can see how I show people how to do this. So, and that's just one singular piece of paper that we fold up and do that with. So is this. So is this. These are all different examples and different approaches to it. Now, all of this stuff that I'm showing you is just to show you that you can, whatever tools that you have to draw with at home, you can use. Okay? And I can't stress this enough. Whatever tools you have are perfect. That's exactly the stuff that you need in order to express yourself creatively. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of really quick things really quickly before the class has to leave us today. Last couple questions. What is something I've never created but dream of bringing to life one day? Whatever I think of, I just do. Do I prefer traditional inking or digital drawing? I do both. What one tool you couldn't live without? John Lennon used to say, I'm a musician. You give me a tuba, I'll get you something out of it. I'm the same way. Whatever you put in my hands or put in front of me, I'm going to give it a try. So there's no such, if I'm on a deserted beach that my ship has crashed in the ocean and I'm now sequestered to this, when I'm not trying to fend for my own survival, I've probably got a stick and I'm drawing in the sand. So, we find ways. Is there any specific theme you enjoy drawing? Anything. I'll try anything out. Is there themes and story types that I prefer? Yes. Do they influence my process of thinking in some ways, but I try to stay open to everything that I can. And by doing so and allowing yourself to jot down notes, no matter how disconnected things can be, those combinations of interesting ideas that gravitate towards your way of seeing the world, given voice, finding a way to express those things, is one, authentically yours, and two, going to be interesting to someone else. Now, one last thing, really quick. Oh, Chris says, any suggestions for people in majors like business, medicine, or not art related? You are going to find mechanisms in any career path that you take. You are going to find interesting approaches and solutions in a creative way that allow you to be better at your jobs. And whatever those might be, if it's in business, you're going to find an interesting way of collating the data sets that you need to be able to make sense of the things that you need to know to do what you need to do. And it's the same in medicine. You're going to look at combinations of data sets that tell you something specifically about how you might be able to discover what is ailing a patient in order to be able to help them out better. And as long as you allow yourself receptivity and openness, and this is a creative means of thinking, as long as you allow yourself that, but to be able to collate that data in some way, you'll be able to utilize it. You'll be able to figure out something that's plaguing an individual that hasn't been able to be understood until now, because you've allowed yourself to be open to the abstract. And even if you draw representational images, like I largely do, by allowing yourself to be open to abstraction in your thinking can make it be a little more interesting for others, right? One way to do that, and this is the sort of last sort of thing I think I have time for with you. We'll leave it 2:45. They have a quiz. Okay. Any factor that aroused your interest in comics? I just gravitated toward those things as a child. I read Rupert. Rupert was a comic that had 4 ways of storytelling, and I'll show you really quickly right here, okay? Rupert, each page had a sketch of the characters at the top with the title up above. Now, under each, so then there were 4 squares, and each of those squares had a couple of little bits of dialogue of the characters talking, very sparingly, but then it also had in verse, like in poem form, what's happening in the panel above it, underneath. And it also on the same page had prose. It had a textual story telling you the same thing that the pictures did, the same thing that the prose did, and the same thing that the spot illustrations with the title did. It's 4 different ways of telling the same story on the same page. So as a child, you could just look at the characters and go, oh, that's Rupert and that's his friend Bill. Rupert and Bill go for a walk. Story 1. Then you see the pictures of Rupert and Bill getting together and going for a walk together. Story 2. Here it is with the prose as you start to develop your reading ability. Story 3. It's all still the same story each time. And then as you learn to read without having to have the picture supplied for you, it's the same story once again, but more in depth. So it takes what the visual and the textual elements do together and expands on them textually. Story 4. I grew up reading Rupert. I'll write it down for it to help people. Rupert the Bear. It's a British thing. And, so I would get those as a kid. If you look, and now here's our quick thing, because we've got 5 minutes, okay? If I'm going to have you do an experiment, first off, I'm going to draw this, and this, okay? So these 3 objects, circle, square, triangle, okay? Now, I ask everybody that's watching this stream, close your eyes for a moment, all right? And just listen to the lulling sounds of my deep voice. Close your eyes for a second, and when you open those eyes, I want you to look around to the environment around you, and I want you to figure out how many things that you see do you think you can break down into squares, triangles, and circles. Okay, so open your eyes up and take a look around. Now, before everybody starts typing answers to the things that you see, I'm going to let you in on a secret. And the answer is everything. You can break down everything in the environment that you're in into circles, squares, and triangles. And by looking at, if you're at a desk, okay? If you look at your desk as though it's a triangle for the perspective goes back to a certain point and moves out from there, but your desk is the top of it is a square or a stretch square or a triangle. The front of it is a rectangular shape, right? The legs of it also, and I'll use a different color to example this, the legs of your desk, if we recede those back to the same perspective point, is also made up of a square, both your sets of the chair's legs. So you draw those legs in like so. Now you've got, and this should be an orange line as well, so it doesn't matter. But now you've got your desk in front of you. The same thing goes for your chair. If you look at your chair as being made of a number of different squares or stretch squares, okay, then when you sit down and you pick and choose which parts of that you're going to use, you're able to draw the chair you're sitting in. So the entire space around you can break down into those shapes. Hiya, Linda. Welcome aboard. Hiya, Tim. So when you look at the environment around you, if you're looking at a car, I'll do this again really fast before your test. If you're looking at a car or a truck, a car is just, again, a combination of these shapes in different ways. If you've got the headlights on the front of your car, okay, you've got the bumper, you've got the grill, you've got the bend in the shape of the front of your car as it goes up to your windshield, so that you've got the wells for the tires. So all of these different combinations of triangular shapes, square shapes, and circular shapes are going to help you start to more readily define the shape of your car. So eventually, over time and practice, there's nothing that you see that you can't figure out how to draw. Is this your class with you? Yes, it is, Linda. Yeah. Yes, it's her class. So trees, if you look from a tree from the top down, it's a circle. If you look at a tree from the side, it's a square or a rectangle. But if you break off in triangular sections the branches of the tree as the tree grows, and you start breaking down those smaller and smaller, skinnier rectangular shapes as it gets higher and farther out, before you know it, you start developing the entirety of a tree. Now, a tree doesn't look like something you should be able to draw using squares and triangles and circles, and yet it is. So anything, you can look at anything utilizing squares, circles, and triangles, and over time you start seeing them as squares, circles, and triangles. Sorry for the messy marks. And you start seeing them as cubes, triangles, and spheres. And so once you start looking at things in that way, you start realizing that everything around you can be broken down into those basic shapes. So hopefully, if you try that out, if you play with this idea, it will help you to find the available opportunity to try to figure out how to draw everything. And the idea of drawing stick person, I can't draw a stick person. Yes, you can. Just think about what the shape of something is. Close your eyes for a second. And how does that work? Well, a person has a head, they have arms, they have legs, they have a body. There's your stick person. And then over time, as you allow yourself the opportunity to spend a little more time playing with the idea of a stick person. You're going to draw them. You're going to start including feet. You're going to start including their hands waving. Like if you allow yourself to access your childlike ability to see the world, you'll start to draw with those with a little more sophistication. And then over time, you'll start to figure out the expressions in their face and their mouth smiling, and you start to draw the features on a person, and you start to get their hair in. Before you know it, you're drawing whatever it is you see through practice. It's the same as if you want to be a surgeon. It's the same if you want to be an actuarial, or a banker. It's the same if you want to be, an engineer. If the same if you want to build things with your hands. Nikola Tesla designed everything that he invented by closing his eyes and figuring out how all the parts work together, or the shapes work together. So there you go, folks. There's something that you can try out, and I hope it works for you. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming out. Thank you, Chris, for the opportunity to talk to everybody. Art and creativity, expression and creativity is something you can access at any time through yourself, through your own mind, and to learn over time, to practice and repeat it, so it becomes more and more sophisticated and interesting as you go. Okay, thanks very much, everybody, for coming and joining the talk. It's really nice to get to know everybody. I'm sorry I didn't get to talk more personally with folks. Good luck with your test. For those of you that aren't as part of Chris's class, stick around. We'll do some more, have some more fun. Get on with today's page. Thank you very much. Oh, it's very nice compliments. I appreciate those. As Linda says, Linda's my moderator. Come on back any old time. Please join in and have some fun. But allow yourself this. Allow yourself to try to express yourself a little more creatively in your life, and give that a go. Thanks, folks. So there you go. The circle, square, triangle. For those of you that are sticking around for the rest of the stream, or for those of you who come back and watch the rest of the stream as well, let's work on a page for today. It's great to have opportunities to chat with people like this. It really is. It's a fantastic opportunity. Thank you, really. I like your work. Thank you. Oh, these are all nice things. Thanks so much, everyone. I appreciate it. I appreciate you got a fantastic teacher there who's also an absolutely brilliant artist. So if you've got more art questions, she has the ability to answer them. She's brilliant and very multi-talented as well. So yeah. Okay, so for today's stream, is there anything anybody wants me to draw using today? I was thinking maybe, I don't know, just a ballpoint pen we can go at today. I've organized my space, cleaned up a little bit again. Chris says, thank you. I'll send you a video on Instagram. Oh, fantastic. Thanks so much. Carlos says, amazing work. Well, you're all very nice. Okay. So I straightened up the studio a little bit because I've been working on some of these large painting commissions recently. And when you do that, you tend to get, like with the studies that you guys have seen me do for these large paintings. I've been doing all these studies of forest images and mountain images. And now that I've completed, these pieces, I have just all of this stuff that's just been piling up out the studio. So, I needed to clean all this up a little bit, and I'm going to give these away to people that, as I run into them, hand those out. If you want one, send me your address, and we'll figure out how to get you some. Let's see. Liz says, I have done 2 perspective pages, and now I'm stuck on how to shade it. Well, let's go over that once more. We talked about this the other day. I showed you using those solid shapes, and I'll grab a couple of those right now. By using these shapes, I showed you how, and this is an octahedron, this is a tetrahedron, or a triangle, or a pyramid, or whatever term you want to use to describe it. When you see this source of light, okay, and how it approaches the object. Source of light's coming from here. There's a secondary source of light that's coming from here. You can see how this is the brightest because it's the closest. This is still illuminated, but it's slightly darker. And this is in largely in shadow because of the fact that this direct source of light, whoops, I'm so sorry, is focused on the other sides. All right? So this one's more clearly in shadow. The darker shadows at the bottom, it's more crisp because it's coming more directly from this side. But you still got that shadow angle coming from this direction, and then you've got extended shadows coming from there and there as well. That's a lot of shadows to have to cope with. But when we break that down in a visual sense, surprised the kitties didn't claim those as new toys. I have them put up, and I tell the new cat Lucy to stay away from them. So let's do our triangle here on paper. So if we've got our shape like so, now we know we've got a direct light so that this side would be brightly illuminated, okay? This side, this light coming from this direction is farther away, so this isn't going to be quite as illuminated, but it's still fairly bright. And yet, because our light source is projected from here, and our light source is projected from here, this side is the one that's in shadow. And at the same time, because our light's coming from there, and our light's coming from there, that's where our deepest shadow on the ground is. Those shadows on the ground, if the color of the ground, in this case, white, and the color of the object, in this case, white, is the same, then the shadow on those two objects tends to be the same. Now, you also have reflection, and so that reflection will show a bit of that white. Let's see if I can find one. Oh, Posca, we got one. So then there'll be a thin line of that value in between your two shadows. Okay, so if we zoom in a little bit, you can see that thin line of white between the two shadows as well. So when you're looking at an object, hey Marsh, how you doing, buddy? So if you're looking at your your perspective pages, okay, so let's say we'll do it like this. How's this? We'll have just a random rectangular object, and we will put it in front of Bob, who's got his hands on his hips, standing directly in front of, or standing directly behind our object. Now, I'm not putting shadows on Bob. I'm just drawing him standing behind our object in a really sort of basic way, right? Now, if our source of light is coming from over here in space, we need to think about all of those shapes that make up Bob. There's our circular shape. We know his forearm is in front of his chest. His chest bows out like so, because we're keeping him nice and basic, right? Triangular shape, rectangular shape, circle, rectangle, triangle, triangle, rectangle, circle. Circle, circle, rectangle, rectangle, triangle, triangle. Okay? So, and then we've got our rectangular shape here. Now, even though I've broken all of our shapes down on Bob in this complex little way, by understanding that our light source, which is over here, is projected onto, oh, wonderful. Chris has sent me a video of her students. So cool. By the way, what class is this? The kids or the adults, and what's the class called? Chris teaches at the university University of Mexico, and these are her senior ESL students, so these are all professionals, accountants, doctors, things like that are refining their English. So when we talk about art and creativity and how they can implement it in their day-to-day life, this is just a general course for them. But because their ESL is defined to such an extent, they can learn in English now and be able to utilize that and to express that in English. But when it comes to artistic creativity and expression using art, that defies language. It's its own language in and of itself. So by teaching them, hopefully, and I hope I didn't use any crazy words that I tend to have with my silly vernacular, I think that they can apply that in any way, shape, or form. And I just wanted to get that across to them, which is why I showed them the basic square, triangle, circle, whamma jamma. Let's go back to this. So if this is our source of light, okay, so our light source is coming here, and I'm using the light source that is the most powerful for my studio setup as well. We understand that the shadow, and I'm going to use this dark brown, and hopefully that makes sense for folks, is going to be strongest on the farthest side, the most opposing side from our singular direct light source. So on the inside of the arm, down on the side of the forearm, that side of the hand, this side of this arm, this side of that arm, right? This side of the body, but I'm going to be even cheekier and draw it into the center of the body as well. Inside of this leg, underneath there, this side of this leg and foot, this side of this leg and foot, underneath those knees, because those knees project out, right? And inside of the neck, here we are in this shoulder, and this side of the face. So that now we can see our person, where the light, and I'll pull in on that now a little bit more, and I'll pull that image up for you. This is awesome. Chris is sending cool videos. So now we can see, here's our light source, here's our guy. And then the second part of this is the cast shadow, okay? So I'm going to use another value again. Our cast shadow, we've got our light source coming from here. Now, as our cast shadow hits our rectangle, it doesn't start where the dark shadow is. It starts on this side, this corner of our object. And it's going to project as the shape of our object for our cast shadow. Okay? Hope this is helping. I had no idea. They have tests and all. Well, they're university level students. Very cool. It's exactly what I need to know. Good, excellent. And briefly back, they're taking their quiz. My students are university. Oh, thank you, Chris, for answering. Our students are university kids from different majors, future lawyers, doctors, engineers. They take English as a foreign language with her in Mexico. Chris is so incredibly fluid, right? And multiple languages, our friend Chris. So as our light source comes here, and thank you again, Chris, for the opportunity to talk to your students as well. I hope that this helps them open up their creative imagination and their ability to access any form of creative expression that they want to try, whether it's words, pictures, or things with their hands, whatever it is their interest is. Looking at the world as in the abstract and as objects and as forms of inspiration around us, and ideas as forms of inspiration around us, hopefully, is able to be utilized in their daily jobs as well. Liz asks what language Chris draws in. Languages. Okay, so here's our light source. Now, when it hits our body, there's going to be shadow from that arm on the inside of the trunk there, and because the body here is going to cast a little bit of cast shadow on that arm there. So that's why I'm drawing it in a slightly different color. Same thing applies. There'll be a little bit of shadow on the inside of this leg here from the inside of the thighs and the leg and underneath the legs, or underneath the body here. And so when we start casting our shadow from our form, it's going to do so like this. And as the volume of our body increases, you'll see the shadow increase, and you might very well see the shape from under the arms and as a person's head goes. So I'm being really exaggerative here, but the whole point of that is to get across to you. And the beautiful thing about light is that if you have multiple sources of light, and in this case we're going to add a second one. Why? Just to make your life more complicated. So here's our second source of light is coming this way. Okay, now I'm using another light again. That second source of light, it's now behind our character. So you'll start to see shadow on the front of our character. And as that light moves along, you'd see it projected on this face of our box, but more distinctly on this face of our box. And so the shadow from our object here into the triangle, the corner that we can't see, makes this wonderful little triangular shape here. And then the shadows from our body, although they're lighter, they're still there from our character moving this way. So there's your two different forms of light coming in. Two different sources are casting two different kinds of light and two different kinds of dark on our objects. So this is how we start to draw things with form. And when we understand that our person is made up of these shapes, these volumes that make up our form, we're just going to reduce it down into rectangular shapes and so forth. And I'm drawing in this light value so that I can be cheeky in a moment. When we start to see things with volume, okay, like so, from our character up here, so that we understand this marker's dying and dead, almost dead on me. That's okay, it's good for this. So that's why I used it. So when we start to understand the things that we draw as having more to them than just being a two-dimensional plane or a flat plane, when we start to see those things, when we pick and choose, when we do our rough drawings on one surface or our rough drawings in something like pencil that can be erased, when we start to pick and choose, if we go over those objects again, we can put high contrast light on things now because we understand how our light source affects our object, so that when we draw our character in, we can have, I'm going to really work tight here, but when we start to understand how the light affects their features and makes these high contrast shadows, these really moody and dramatic shadows on their form, now we understand it's because the light is hitting their face really hard on that side and it's not on that side. Yep, nope, right? So that we can start to define high contrast images now, because what we really understand is this is made of shapes like these, right? Hope that helps. Hi, Seven, welcome aboard. In our summer course, we have a unit called Creativity. Christopher to do the stream. It helps my students with their listening skills, as there are no subtitles. Oh my goodness. Oh, they're laughing. I hope so, or they're crying anyways. They're an intermediate level of an intermediate level of English. Some are high intermediate. There we go. Seven saying hi to everybody. So yeah, I try to take it easy on them. I try to remember not to use, extraneous terminology or terrible words. And when I do, I try to use an alternate example as well. Or when I say sophistication, I also say a high level of complexity or a high level of difficulty. And I try to break words down so that they understand the connection or combination of those words together. Complicated thing about English, when we have 6 different things, when we have 6 different examples of a word, and our dictionaries or our thesaurus try to say, these things all relatively mean the same thing. They do and they don't. And Chris knows this full well. There's a reason that we have these specific examples of words that we use. But when you say decimate, right? Or you say annihilate for, oh my heavens, have I figured out how to spell that? Annihilate, thank you, for something. Decimate is from a Roman term, which means when the legion fails in conquering somebody, the legion is taught a lesson by 1 in 10 people being punished. That's how you decimate the legion. You punish 1 in 10 of them and then say, go do it again and do it right this time. But when we annihilate something, we wipe it all out. But people will say, these two things mean the same thing. They do, but they don't, right? English is terrible because it takes from German, French, Latin, Spanish, everything, and incorporates, embeds all those things into its language. So it's quite a complicated thing for Chris to be able to teach ESL on the level she does. So hopefully I've done right by her students. I hope I can see the video on Instagram. I'll love it. Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch that. Thank you so much for sending it. I hope this helps, folks. Liz, I hope this helps you with understanding, because you already know, because I've seen your drawings and you got it. You've definitely got it. You already know that these three shapes can make up everything, including people. And, oops, they're not on screen. Oh, no, they are. Okay. All right. My apologies anyways. So by looking at these three shapes and how, it's one thing to see them as two-dimensional planes. As soon as we start to see triangles as, pyramid shapes or tetrahedrons, tetrahedron, if you've got to be specific, as soon as we see that become this, become this, then we start to understand how we can use these shapes in a positive and a negative way. And what I mean by that is, if you, so let's say we see an object, okay, like a square, and we apply a triangular shape or a pyramidal shape or a tetrahedron shape to it, we can put it in, or we can put it onto the object so that we add it on top. So now that we see how it attaches itself to the top of the object, right? And applies itself to it. I've done it in a frame kind of a way, so you can see it how it fits on top. Because technically, even though I'm drawing with the pen, let's say I'm sketching with pencil. Now, when we apply light to it, we can see the dark side of it. We can see the projection of the shadow on top of it. So now it becomes something more sophisticated. And so as we're trying to, if we're trying to example our ideas and to draw them in more complex ways, we can do so by having a more clear understanding of form. Right? Right. So then when we start, now that we've taken our shadow down here, we also know that our cast shadow down here works in this way. Now you start seeing how our drawings are becoming more complex. And it really is just basic understanding of shapes and how shapes work with light. Shapes, light, and those things together, right? And even if you use line in there to start off with, those three things together become dimension or form, right? It's we start our drawings in very simple ways. Line, straightforward. We're drawing, but even when kids draw a stick person and they have them waving, they'll start to do this. And as soon as they start to put the hand on there, so you can see the hand waving in the air, well, we already know that the stick that is the arm has a more complex amount of sticks at the end to make the hand. And then it just becomes more and more ways of making those shapes a little more complex, right? And then adding more complexity to those to make the hands that we know fits at the end of the wrist, and so on and so forth. And so that our fingers start to become even more complex-eyed objects and they have more frame and scale to them, so that you start to see the palm now. You start to see how the hand is rooted into the wrist. And over time, these levels of complexity develop from more and more cutting in of shapes. And we know that the bottom of the hand is kind of a triangular. You know, you've got your flat plane here, you've got your triangular aspect of the palm, the circular aspect of the sides of our palm, the triangular aspect of the tip of the thumb, but we also know it's a circle there. The tips of our fingers are circular when you get up close, but they're also big rectangles and combinations of rectangles. You know, and yet our hand can make triangular shapes. Our fingers specifically, our hand itself, right? Our hand can also make round shapes or try to make square shapes as we can, right? Round shapes. So understanding the combinations of these three things opens up for us all kinds of opportunities of breaking down more and more complicated things into those shapes. And the more and more that we allow ourselves that and understand that, then the more interesting and complicated our drawings can be. It just takes practice. That's it. That's it. That's literally all it is. That's all drawing is. Anybody that tells you it's real, but it's also, it's being open to seeing things and allowing yourself to break them down into lines and shapes and adding light. Now they've got dimension and form. Then we start making them a little more interesting as we go. We can take the triangle shapes that our arms make when they're bent at our sides as our hands are on our hips. You know, what makes our hands more and more complex is more and more combinations of these. Our arms more complex, and the whole of our bodies, the face. Yeah, that's all it is. I've got to go. Still 40 minutes of class. Oh, thank you so much, Chris, for stopping in. It was wonderful. It's always a pleasure. Liz is going to make some shapes as well. Marsh says, my wife is Polish, and she always complains about how in English one word can often have many different meanings depending on the context. That's exactly the truth. But I complain about Polish because there's multiple consonants before you get to a vowel. That's also true. I'm still working on this is Golem Wolf Draws. I'm still working on a reliable construction method for drawing hands. It's always good to get back to basics. By the way, for your great lesson today, I'm going to give you a one-page drawing idea. Always welcome. Please feel free to do so. Put it in the chat. And if you're watching this video after the video is over, put it in the comments for the video, and I will write those down as well. But yeah, please feel free to do so, Liz, and anybody else that wants to throw a one-page idea for me to draw and to collect. And I'll show you this one. This is our second volume of one-page story extravaganza. And so all these come from, this suggestion is, a children's toy goes on a path of revenge. And so here's the idea I have. Remember to take care of your childhood toys. Just might save your life one day. And I drew this in marker and I finished it digitally. But let's see if we can pull in. You can let me do it, robot? There you go. So this is a one-page suggestion someone's made, and we've made a one-page story out of it. So is this. So is this. So is this. So is this. And so on. And so on. So that's what we do. If you allow yourself to use a lighter value when you're working up your drawing and shapes, and then you come in with a darker value for you to figure out how light works on your object, and then you take an even darker value and maybe place another piece of paper over top of this one, hold it up to a window or put it under a light table underneath, and then you start drawing, you start picking and choosing those specific shadows as you see them here, and you start picking and choosing them out this way as you're doing your finished drawing, so that you've got your character in their forearm, and their shadow underneath their body and how that plays in. And then you've got the shadow behind their elbow, and you've got your fingers in there, right? There's the shadow underneath those, under your hip, right? How that shadow plays on the forearm here. So that when you're doing your finished drawings, you can now leave out the shape of the thing, the structure of the form, and just draw in how you've come to understand how the light works on said object. So now you don't have to draw all of the finer little frameworks that come together for drawing your character. You're just focusing on the high contrast elements of them and how they sit within space. So then it becomes a case of you don't have to draw the entirety of the line. You can just focus on its emphasis points. Make your drawings a little more complex, a little more interesting as you go. Allow yourself that. Allow yourself the chance to experiment with ways to illuminate the initial drawing, and then how it develops into something more complex. And that initial drawing is built up of your understanding of those shapes and how those shapes become forms from light. Yeah. Polish, I'm still working on a reliable construction. I'm working on my own comic page right now, so I'm soaking up all the advice I can get. Well, anything I can do to help out, just please let me know. My next page will be a person facing a wall with all the clues for solving a murder on the facing wall, so it could highlight the clues. If you do that, here's an idea, Liz. How about we try this? Let's take the idea. You've got person, right? Clues of a murder. Is that what it was? Murder? Murder. Okay. After watching a Netflix movie, I Googled killer women. There's so many awesome pictures of scenes there. Oh, you bet there are. So clues of a murder and projected onto wall, right? So there's your basics. So if you draw, there's two different ways you can look at that. And there's two different ways you can make that interesting. If you have the source of light, so let's draw the person here, okay? So we'll draw our lady as she's standing here, and I'll do it in really basic shapes so that we'll give her a ponytail, all right? So if we've got our person who's standing here facing the wall, okay, and here she is in front of it, and here her basic form is, her arms are at her side. Let's put her other arm raised up, and she's got her fingers on her chin as she's looking at the wall. How's that? Does that work? Now, if she's got her, and her second hand is down at her hip, and then there's her form as she stands in front of the wall, right? So there's our character. And then let's do our plane. So now add some perspective in it. So put your perspective point wherever you need to, so that you've got your plane in front of you. And with said plane, it allows you to put everything into some kind of measure of perspective in front, right? So here's our point. So that all of your images that you put on your wall can run to your perspective line. Yeah? Yeah. So now we know these things. We know there's two different things. We've got our vertical axis, which is up top here, and this is our lines working up and down. We've got our horizontal plane, okay, over here, which is all of our lines moving across the horizontal plane. But we've also put a diagonal axis in there, and that's this one. So there you've got your vertical, your horizontal, your diagonal. We know she's standing on a floor. There's our horizontal, right? There's her big old feet. Okay? So, here she is standing there. There's our horizontal. Here's our diagonal for interest, and our vertical. Hey, Corbin. So whatever you do with your objects that you put on your wall, it doesn't have to be this now. Okay? Which just incorporates the vertical and the horizontal. Now, because you've got a perspective point, sorry, right? We've got our diagonal. So now our object runs off to a point. So when you place all your things on your wall, now everything goes to your diagonal. Exciting! And if you apply your source of light in accordance with your diagonal, okay, all of that light is going to come from this point, this source point. So as it applies to your character, right, and it applies to your board, all of these objects, and look down here at this now, are going to be affected by that source of light. Right? Big L. So, and your character, as that light affects her, and I'll do this really lightly with this pen that's not doing so well, so that it casts an interesting shadow on her. We're looking for all those areas that aren't in direct light. Even that crazy hair. So now there's a mood, an atmosphere that you can apply in your drawings because, one, you have figured out what your composition is and you've arranged it in an interesting way by, two, drawing it with the lines and shapes which become those forms because of the next one. 3, source of light. You've learned all these things already. You've got all these things. Specifically Liz, I know Marsh does. I know Chris does. Right? I know Liz does. I know anybody that's watching here. We're all figuring out these things together. But by applying that source of light, okay, now we're making it interesting and we're making it have mood or atmosphere. Atmosphere. There you go. That's got to be challenging for your wife whose first language is Polish, Marsh, because atmosphere, it means a feeling within a setting, but atmosphere also means the upper levels of the sky into outer space. The atmosphere. How complicated is that for your poor wife? I'll take a whole bunch of vowels before I get, or a whole bunch of consonants before I get to vowels, before I have to figure out the difference of meaning for atmosphere. Poor girl. After watching a Netflix movie, I go before the woman. Oh, we got that. Liz says, tricky and way more interesting. I'm working on a sample script. The first page is focusing on some World War I era stories. The leader is the focus and is calling his troop to charge with him. Any tips for making the leader the focus? Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you asking that, Golem Wolf. Here's something to think about. So when we allow ourselves open and we allow ourselves to be receptive to ideas, something to consider about World War I. World War I was this army, we'll say the Germans, and this army, we'll say the French and the English. They're moving as far as they can. Now, the Germans had a problem with the blitzkrieg technique that they've had in World War I, and most specifically in World War II, is they charge and they charge and they charge. And they outrun their supply lines, okay? So because of that, they charge and they got to stop at a certain point before they can't get all the things that they need to keep charging. You know, food, munitions, right? So they stop. And the guys that are holding them back charge all the way up to the point where they meet them and they hold them, largely because they've run out of stuff to keep them from pushing. So in order to keep one from the other being overwhelmed, they both dig tunnels. And that's why you have the Maginot Line, which is the French commander, the line that was named after him. And you have the trenches, of course, by the Germans. The reason that they dug those trenches is because Well, that's where they dug their feet in, but because of the fact that they're shooting things at each other that will hurt each other, they drew trenches into the ground, and they dug those out and they got down in them so that they didn't get hurt. But the problem with that is, how do you move forward now? How do you push forward now? The only way to push forward now in World War I was for someone to decide usually at the far back of the battlefield, from where the front lines or the trenches are, someone made a decision. Well, we got to get farther ahead. We got to push farther ahead. We got to take out those Germans. We got to take out those French. And the way that they would do that is they would send a command from the back down to the front and say, so if your command is here and your command is here and the trenches are here, and in this case will be German, in this case will be French. So the word comes from the back and it says, hey, send some runners and you tell these guys to go all the way up there to the front, and for those guys to attack when we blow the whistles. And the German guys are doing the same thing. You attack when we blow the whistles. And the way to do that is you tell that guy, the hero in charge, the captain, hero, subjective, you tell the captain that at 6 a.m. we're going to send a whole bunch of bombs at the bad guys, and you're going to push with your soldiers. And it's a combination of the guys on the opposite side hiding from the bombs, but at the same time being ready to repel the guys charging towards them. So the person, the captain, who is the one in the front line, has to get the word from up front, and knowing that the bombs blow up the lines of communication, because back then it's still a long spool of wire for you to be able to answer the phone. So when the wire blows up, now it's people running to you instead of being called. But that person has to be able to say, all right, guys, let's go. The bombs are keeping them in their trenches, hopefully. Let's try to run to their trenches and say, hey, you're out, we're in, before the bombs get us too. Or they sit up because the bombs have stopped, or they're going to brave the bombs and they're going to push us back and say, this is ours. And the captain has to get that command and has to tell his guys, this is a good idea, before it's not. It's not from the first moment. This goes on for 4 years, folks. 4 years of useless waste of life, from the motivations from the person at the back. So the person that's in charge of that has to be galvanized enough to say, we got to go. And it has to be a person who is encouraging and charismatic enough to say, this is a good idea. And also has to be cognizant of the fact that they have to be able to say to people, retreat, back, it's not working, back we go, back, and gets back in their trenches before the bad guys repel them fully. Harrowing. So if you're going to focus on making the leader and making some gravitas to the leader, let him weigh that out in his mind. There's a reason trench warfare is over, and it's due to the fact that people have things that are more and more efficient at making you understand how bad an idea they are. The tank, the German might have had better tanks in World War I, but they only had 3 to 100 of the British tanks. So their tanks might have been better, but the British, they had far more reliable ones. And so the thing that broke trench warfare wasn't the shooting, because unfortunately the commanders, way back in the safety of the command points at the far back of the battlefields, did not matter to them, the bullets. They'd still make people run in front of them. But the tanks didn't care about the bullets. The tanks just drove over into the trenches. That's what ended trench warfare. In both of those situations, that captain, that leader at the front, was in a terrible position. How do you make a compelling story about the leader? Let them wrestle with the reality of that terrible situation, because it's awful. And what that value brings to the reader is, boy, maybe I didn't know it was that bad. Maybe when we look back at history and we go, oh, that was rough. How many people died? That's terrible. When you find out why, that's worse. And then you get to visualize that, which is challenging, but at the same time, compelling. So fantastic. Something to take on, Gunnar Wolf. It's fantastic something to take on. The leader could be on the phone. Well, initially the leader would be on the phone. They would initially be on the phone, but when the bombs that the Germans would shoot towards the French, or the British and French would shoot towards the Germans, when the bombs would blow up the telephone lines, now you got to convince 4 people, 3 people, 4 people, 5 people to run to the front and tell the people at the front, charge. You also have to have people that run to the front and say, stop. And the reason you send 3 or 4, you need 1 to get through. See? Every part of this whole thing is harrowing, horrible, and awful. Now, there was a comic series, and I'm trying to remember what it was called. Starts with an A. I think it starts with an A, maybe an H. There's already been a comic series that's been put out, set during World War I, set during trench warfare. But the interesting affectation they added to their comic series was that they mixed Harry Potter world with World War I, so that there's magic in this universe. And so while there is, yes, trench warfare, and yes, it's awful. I haven't even talked about the gas yet. there's poison gas. Anyway, but there's magic. And so the couriers that get the message from the command to the front are people that can run on the air, people that can fly. Now they're running during the bombs flying at a place where they can be shot at far more easier. Horrible. Even that's horrible. It's something about Achilles, I think it is. Achilles is in there somewhere in the title. Anyways, look it up. There's a comic out there about it, and it's wonderful. It's beautifully illustrated, and I believe it was Carlos Pacheco that did it. I believe it was Carlos Pacheco. Pacheco. I've probably pronounced it wrong, and if I did, I'm sorry. Beautiful. I believe it was him that did that. And it's absolutely beautiful, but at the same time, what a horrible scenario. But you want to make the leader the focus, make them wrestle with that reality, and you want to make it interesting, make it dark and dirty and awful, because it was. Don't make it pretty. But yeah, then when the phone lines get blown out, they got runners going. I really struggle with drawing group scenes. The first page is a splash of him calling the charge of his troops behind him. He gets lost in the crowd when in previous attempts. I've actually been reading some war comics lately. Any specific ones you remember, or you recommend, I'm sorry? Awesome ideas for a page, Liz says. Thank you, Golem. I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I wish I could tell you the name of it offhand. It was, I believe it was Image, and Carlos Pacheco was involved. If you're looking at a crowd scene, any ones I would recommend, well, 1, I would recommend the one I'm talking about. 2, War Stories. I think it was DC. Where's Corbin? I don't want to run him over. Let me see. Blazing Combat. It's a Fantagraphics book. Look how easy that was. It was right at my feet. I read it recently. Blazing Combat is that's real perspective on war stories. So they're ugly. Easy man, like this one page. Easy man, I started moving up when I heard the mines. Don't seem to be much bone damage, but the tourniquet will stop the bleeding. Isn't that terrible enough? Yeah. I was just looking. Notice his teeth? Most of the fillings were gold. And look at the look on his face of, most of his fillings are gold. What does that mean? War is terrible. War is horrible. In all the different comics that, for example, war, it's important that we show that. This is the War of Independence. And he's saying, fall out and take cover. War is horrible. You should show that. Blazing Combat was a great book for doing that. It really was. And it's got all kinds of really impressive creators. I mean, you got Frazetta in there, you got everybody in there. But Wally Wood did some fantastic war stories. Look up some Wally Wood stuff. Of course, Joe Kubert. Unknown Soldier, I thought, was always interesting and complex. Because Unknown Soldier showed you that war is ugly and war is unfair. And, when you see things like the Unknown Soldier joining up with the French Resistance, they had to do some terrible things. They had to go through some terrible things. There's a fantastic bunch of books that I've been reading lately about the Netherlands during wartime. And they had it rough. That was a rough spot. Everybody had it rough, let's be honest. Right? Terrible for everybody. If you're going to draw a scene where you're going to want to do a crowd shot and you want to have a guy and you want to draw the focus to him, there's a couple of different things to consider. Let's try this. Let's try this out. Let's do this together. Now, what have we got? We got the captain of the charge, right? You've got the soldiers of the charge. You've got their uniforms because they're French or they're German, right? Soldiers of the charge, and overall French, German, English, right? Largely French and German. And then you've got the moment. I'm calling it the moment for a reason. So you've got the captain, and I'm just going to do them in really rough ways. Okay, so I made a note. Captain of the charge, soldier of the charge, the moment, and the fact that they're either French or German is the other part of that note. Sorry, my big noggins in the way. I'll get it out of the road. So, now, if you've already identifiably got the trench, okay, there's the trench, there's no man's land, and then over here you've got the enemy, right? And in no man's land you got the barbed wires, you got the barriers, you got the pits, you got the bomb craters, and then here you've got bunkers underground. You've got and what I mean by bunkers is it's really basically just timber construction that optimally reinforces a place where a person can hide during the bombs, during the explosions. The underlying principle of World War I, I read this recently, and this is why I say the whole thing's terrifying. 87% PTSD. We call it PTSD now, which an interesting thing George Carlin calls soft language. Right? And there's a reason for that. 87% shell shock. shell shock is because of the fact that they all have to survive constant bombardment. Even before they rise out of the trenches, try to charge across no man's land to get the enemy. Shell shock. Think about the harrowingness of that before. Even before that is the bombs. 87% shell shock. Horrifying. Anyhow, if you're going to have a group shot where you've got all your guys, one way you can do it is to put the focus on the lead. So if you've got, I'm going to do it from this angle, okay? So if you've got your main guy waiting, okay, and he's holding his pistol, right, and he's got his knees in front of him, there's his boots. So as he's sitting here waiting and he's got his helmet on, draw the rest of them behind him and give him somebody to nurture. And what I mean by that is if you've got a guy who's pressed right up against him because he's leaning on him really heavily for the situation to go, so that you start to draw your guy, your lead, just outline him, and then you've got your second guy who's leaning on him with the gun, who's leaning on him a little too closely because he's terrified, and he should be, right? And then you've got your next guy and your next guy and your next guy, and they're all waiting to go over, and they're possibly waiting in the mud, and there's possibly muddy ladders, and they're all possibly smoking. But focus on them in the panel, and when the whistle goes and he rises up out of the hole, and he's got his, even if he's climbing the ladder, as he comes out of the hole, and he's got his gun slung over his shoulder, right? And draw him taller than everybody else. Draw him higher up than everybody else coming out of that hole. The whole point is, if you're going to have a focus, if you're going to have a lead, and you're going to have everything as directed from this person, either draw them in that John Wayne, follow me, fellas, let's go take the beach, right? Longest Day, horrible movie, completely undervalues how terrible it was to storm Normandy. Have them as the charismatic lead, or as the person saying, come on, we got to go, let's go, right? And it galvanizes everybody that they immediately charge after him. If he's running in the foreground, like if he's taking the point, let's go. We got to back up our guy. We don't want to let him down. Or have it as him wrestling with the emotion of the moment, and have your shots, him weighing. There's an interesting shot in Saving Private Ryan, where you see Captain Willard, played by Tom Hanks. He loses sound at one point, and it's just him trying to get the sound back, looking around at the terrible things happening, the explosions. Person saying, "What now, sir?" He has to say, "Get off the beach." But he has to himself get over the impact of the explosions around him at first. It's interesting, but terrifying. The whole thing's terrifying. But yeah, focus on your guys as your main focus. War books, I would recommend Unknown Soldier comics from DC. I would recommend Blazing Combat from Fantagraphic Books. I would highly recommend the Nom, the early issues of the Nom, and I'll show you. Give me 1 second. I'll see if I can find those, and then we'll wrap up in a few minutes here. The Nom by Michael Golden is set in Vietnam, yes, But what's really interesting, I'm seeing if I can find it. What's really interesting about it is how he drew it. And of course, I'm not going to be able to find it as easily as I have. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll try to find those for tomorrow. How's that? I'll find some interesting more books for tomorrow. But Michael Golden drawing the Nam, what's interesting about that is that he draws, one, first and foremost, the storytelling, the level of sophistication in that for using the vernacular of the day and using the short speak language of, the soldiers. Somebody's green means that they're a rookie. They're green. I'm short means I've only got so many days before I can get out of here. Right? He's or somebody's he's on his second tour, right? He's a 2-tour man. Means that somebody survived their 2-year term and then re-enlisted to come back to that. Whether it's for camaraderie, whether it's for, their fulfillment being in that, or whether it's for obligation, or whether it's for economics. Somebody signed up for that second time. But second tour people tend to be more galvanized soldiers, right? But there's so many interesting things. Michael Golden illustrating that, though, he got a hold of so many interesting things visually. And he has a fantastic example that I think everybody should look at. Golden Wolf, you need to look at Michael Golden's way of making sure that you understand visually the differences from one character to the next. And it's harder. You're harder pressed for that for World War One because all your French soldiers are going to be French. But you can draw them having different weights to them. You can draw them having different, visual affectations like mustaches and stuff like that. But with Michael Golden and doing Vietnam, of course, he has the ethnicities at play. He has the different sizes of the guys. There's the southern yokum. He's got that whole "Whoa, how you doing?" kind of a thing. Very visually represented. There's so many interesting things. Marsh says, I'm reading the first 12 issues now of the Nam. Michael Golden is an amazing illustrator. Michael Golden made G.I. Joe something else. He did a couple of stories in G.I. Joe. And those G.I. Joe stories are, well, you know what? I bought a portfolio of Michael Golden's illustrating G.I. Joe. I'll show you that tomorrow. How's that? I'll show that tomorrow. I'll take a minute and do it now. Just give me 1 second. 7. I think the leader may also be looking at a map, perhaps. Oh, that's great. Yeah, he definitely needs to know where to go. He sure does. That's fantastic, Liz. In that scene in the movie where new recruit saluted the leader and another soldier knocked his hand down saying, don't make him a target. Oh, yeah, Liz. That's, what are you doing? Yeah, that whole, what are you doing? Yeah, we need him. He's important. And so there's real value to that. And then, of course, there's another moment where a leader holds a soldier and says, what are you doing? Huh? I'm going to have to come back for you in a minute? What are you, crazy? Both sides of the same thing. I'll show you the Michael Golden thing really quickly. I just, this is something silly and new. Excuse the noise. But I have to go down the hallway. Excuse me a moment for the noise again. I gotta go by the humidifier, and we're back in the studio. We've moved the studio around a little bit. Lori has joined me She's moved her office down to my studio. Michael Golden's G.I. Joe yearbook. So, because of that, we've set up a library in the house, which is very exciting for us. So, okay, so this is the original art pages of. Am I fully up? No. There we go. This is as good as we're going to get. Michael Golden's ability to bring so much character to each individual is fantastic. But when he draws the actions and he draws the characters, he does so. And this is what I wanted to show you, Golden Wolf. Oliver Stone's platoon was interesting. Yes, it was. Very much so. Right. What's 3 up and 3 down mean to you? The end of an inning. Yeah, that's really important. That's really important, Liz. When Golden draws characters and draws the scenarios of the action, he does so, and this is again, he wants your focus on Baroness, so he puts her in a way using contrast of color, contrast of value, the black tank over the other to draw the emphasis to her, as opposed to these other characters. And this one's covering his ears with the bang, 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 right? This one's hustling, but between one vehicle to the next. This shows the explosion of the munitions in the air. This shows the collapsing, the crashing of one of the vehicles, just to show you the impact of that. There's so many interesting things he does, and there it is with the text. So many interesting things he does. Here's characters, scouts running back from the oversight of the action that you saw on the previous page and the valley on the other side. Here's dramatic tension drawn to the action, a little cartoony, but the exaggeration of the characters in the action scenes. Little cartoon, a little over exaggerated, but purposely done because it's a funny story, a funny, silly story. But look at the dramatas there of the guy getting these two guys getting blown up just in front of their vehicle, so that it upturns their tank. We lost one of the tanks. Again, same thing. People jumping from one to the next, and the exaggeration therein. Look at the face. Ah! Even the Baroness in the G.I. Joe comic is terrified. There's vehicles crashing into vehicles, and yet at the same time, the drawings are so incredible, so wonderfully fully done. Yeah, just so much good stuff. Here's a guy running with his hands tied. There's a guy pulling armament out. There's a guy shouting commands. This one's pulling her onto the ship. Just good stuff all around, but give focus on the character that is of import in the scene. In this case, Destro barking commands. This case, Destro sitting on the ground going, well, that was a failure. Good stuff. So just making sure I'm keeping up with all the comments. So take a look at Michael Golden's work just to see good examples of scaling and good examples of focus of intent with each scene, right? Here's the train moving through. Here's the guys rushing the train. Oh, here they come. There they come. The ships, the planes. So, yeah, allow yourself to take a look at fantastic examples like Golden's work. He makes G.I. Joe have impact. There are so many good G.I. Joe books, and no dismissal of other people's work, but there's so many G.I. Joe books that are cartoony, and yet at the same time, there's so many G.I. Joe books that have power to them. I think it might have been Mike Zeck. It might have been. There was a month where Marvel Comics, all the books they put out, didn't have any dialogue or narration. It was entirely I mean, the writers still scripted, like still wrote the scripts for their illustrators, but it's entirely dependent on the visuals of the book. And I think it was Mike Zeck that did a story of Snake Eyes fighting against bad guys in a city scene, in a city scenario, and so powerful, incredibly strong visual storytelling. Mind you, it's a G.I. Joe book, and it's set contemporarily, but it's powerful. It's a fantastic war book. That would be a really good example to use. But yeah, lots and lots of good stuff. I picked up recently an adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. Somebody illustrated that, and somebody adapted that in the comic form. And of course, that's about the bombing of Dresden and the fact that he was a prisoner in Slaughterhouse number 5, in Dresden during the Allies bombing that German city after the war ended. It's not a good sign for the good guys, especially when they're bombing their own. So yeah, there's all kinds of great war books for different reasons. Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five has got some great stuff in it. So, and a good adaptation of that. A good adaptation of that indeed. But yeah, there's interesting stuff out there to look at and to use as fantastic inspiration and maybe some insight in things that succeed, in visual storytelling, and things that may not succeed in visual storytelling. But one way or another, try to work out the course of action for yourself and try to work out the exampling of what does and what doesn't work for you, and try to try to replicate it on a piece of paper in order for you to understand, to really understand it. What it is specifically that's happening. What am I missing? Oliver Stone, yeah, good stuff. Fascinating, cool expressions of character, 7 says. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, anyways, so that's today. I think we'll wrap it up. So this is today. I hope this helps. I hope that, trying to envision course of action helps. More so, sometimes it's better than drawing this for people to help to people understanding the trench-to-trench action in a scenario. There's interesting stuff. I guess Band of Brothers television series, I know it's set in World War II, but the Band of Brothers episodes that take place, where is that? I'm trying to think of where the incident is. There's a chunk of time where they're doing trench warfare. There is a little piece of time where they and the Germans are, I think it's Bastogne. I think it's Bastogne, where the Allies are dug into trenches and the Germans are bombing them. And they've pretty much leveled the forest by the end of it all. And so that these guys are just dug down in the pits. Hey, that's my thing saying you're done. So, all right, I hope that helps, folks. And I hope that any of the stuff that we talked about today helps people out, looking at how we take lines and shapes and apply light to them to give dimension and form to our illustrations, and trying to figure out how that helps to add that level of sophistication to our drawings. Now, start simple and add over time, right? And build up more sophisticated drawing. But allow yourself the time to develop to that, and allow yourself to understand the value of taking basic shapes, adding dimension to them, using those shapes to build up our compositions and the objects within them. They don't have to be the most fancy things right off the top. Don't start drawing world like war stuff and thinking you're going to get Michael Golden right off the hop. But even when you look at Michael Golden's artwork, you realize those are shapes. Those are combinations of shapes that he makes his work from. And over time, we all get there. But it takes us time. I'm still working towards things as well. I'm not Michael Golden by any means. There's all sorts of fine things we can learn from watching others. And seeing what they did before us and seeing what we can learn to or to not do. From studying those things. There's an interesting artist in Toronto named, I think it's Richard Taylor. He did Sandman Mystery Theater. Now I hope I have the right guy. It's about Wesley Dodds in the 1930s. But Sandman Mystery Theater, he would shoot photos. He would go and work out the whole scene, shooting pictures, and then work from that. But he was setting things during 1930s, and it's fantastic. So there's all kinds of stuff we can learn from all kinds of sources. Okay, I'm going to sign off for now. I'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. EST, and let's get together and hang out and do some more stuff. I will get a page done for tomorrow, and we'll see what we can discover together. Okay, thanks very much, everybody, for coming out. Thank you for all the people that tuned in. Thank you so much to Chris's class and Chris Kalun. Please go check out the work of anybody that you see within the chat and within the dialogue that takes place, and go take a look at their work and see what they're working on and try to find them on different social media. And by all means, if you have a one-page suggestion for a story, even if it's 3 words or a single line of dialogue, feel free to send that to me, and we'll get crack-a-lackin' on it and turn it into a one-page story. You can find my stuff on Patreon, or you can find my stuff on Amazon. You can see the original art as well as the finished pages on Patreon. Thank you, as always. Oh, great live today. Back to 23 questions next time, says Les. Thanks, Les. Thanks so much, as always, to everybody who took part in the chat today, and as always, to Linda, our moderator with the mostest. And please feel free to go and look at everybody else's work and see what they're doing. There's so many valuable contributions creatively from all the people involved. And, I enjoy looking at all your work. I really do. I learn so much from that, as much as, hopefully I'm passing on to you. Okay, I'll be back tomorrow at 2 p.m. EST. In the meantime, go make something. Go have some fun. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now. And click the button.